So let's get into the questions. Oh, just bear with me. I've never made a video like this before, so a bit amateur, but you know. Okay, so TSCTH. He's the guy that runs the Discord server, by the way. He asks, why didn't the All-Mother use robots instead of genetically engineering humans? Okay, and just under that comment, Blastboard replied to it with, if I had to guess myself, it's a perversion of incentives. She was tasked with winning the war for humanity. Nobody told her that genetically modified humans that acted nothing like the humans that came before don't count. They have human genes, so as far as she's concerned, they are humanity. And Ryan Bowers, who regularly commissions me for artwork, so thank you, Ryan, chimes in with, I agree with this. She was tasked with winning the war for humanity and having humanity stand triumphant over a mound of alien corpses. Based. And Gabu also replies saying, good point. She's mass producing human prosperity like the Paperclip Maximizer AI that Nick Bostrom of Oxford University wrote in a thought experiment. Now, that probably sounds quite esoteric to a lot of people, or maybe not to some other people. But the Paperclip Maximizer, I'll just explain what that is quickly for people that don't know. It's basically this hypothetical scenario where an AI is tasked with becoming more efficient at producing paperclips, or something along those lines. I'm just going to paraphrase and you'll get the gist of it. So it's tasked with becoming more efficient at producing paperclips, and it has access to a factory, and it has access to the internet and a network of computers, and it becomes more efficient at producing paperclips. Now, the hypothetical scenario goes something like this, that it kind of takes over production, it scours the earth for resources to produce paperclips, it manufactures a armed force to defend paperclip production, because, you know, if something stopped it, it would affect the efficiency of paperclip production. And basically the entire earth is consumed and turned into paperclips, and it creates a space program, and it goes out into the universe, and it starts this kind of self-replicating robot process of just producing paperclips out of all matter in the universe. That's the idea behind it, okay? Something like that. I'm really paraphrasing, but you get the idea. And what Blass is saying is that the Imperium is doing that just with humans. And really, if you boil it down, yeah, that's kind of what's happening. But there's more to it than that. But the Imperium is a human optimizer, or maximizer, if you want to put it that way. Yeah, to answer TSCTH's question more precisely, mechanical robots require maintenance. They're susceptible to hacking, EMPs, yeah, all of those sort of things. They require infrastructure. I know the Imperium does as well, but it's kind of like a different kind of process to establishing that. Whereas biomechanical technology, you don't need many moving parts. You just need like a birthing pod, or a mother, or a sac of some kind, and the right string of genetic information, and you can gestate. For a period of gestation, you can birth or grow any type of unit that you want, and you can set up entire self-sustaining ecosystems in vacuums, in any type of alien environment you can think of, because you can always adapt it on the fly, because the All-Mother is there to constantly create new forms of technology and life that can best serve the Imperium, and she adapts alien life into that as well, if it's compatible with the human genome. And yeah, so they're always evolving, and they're not susceptible to EMPs, hacking, or any of that kind of thing. But you could say that they are, like, one flaw with them is that they're susceptible to like a viral pathogen or like a bioweapon. But any two batches of clones, like, they're different. They're genetically distinct from one another. Got a different genetic code, string of information. And say you manage to take out one entire batch, well, the next one won't be susceptible to the same disease or virus or whatever. And even if you have a particularly prevalent, effective one, it won't take very long for the Allmother to immunize the entire batch to that new weapon, basically rendering it useless, and you can't really keep up with Allmother in terms of invention and because she's like a godlike AI. Alright, okay, so I think that kind of answers the question. And then Ivan Polozov and Planet Ace both ask a very similar question. They ask, what inspired you to start this project? It was a combination of things, really. One thing I can point to would be watching the Alien Planet documentary as a child. If you haven't seen that, it's a speculative evolution faux documentary about a hypothetical expedition to an alien planet, Darwin 4, and it kind of chronicles the story of these two probes that are going around the planet and examining the various alien life forms as though it's a wildlife documentary or something of that sort. And I just remember watching that and just being really, really inspired. My young mind just exploded when I saw that. And there's a string of other documentaries and shows and series that are very similar that came out at the same time. There's one called Extraterrestrials, and I remember being obsessed with that one. There was a mixture of CGI and puppet work in it, and it was just it was really creative, and you could feel like it was creative, and you could feel like the people who made it really enjoyed making it, and that was very, very inspiring. I've always been into that level of it's like a sandbox that you can kind of play in and make designs of your own, because I've always loved designing and creating things, and I kind of was taken with that genre of speculative evolution because there's so much potential there, and you kind of set your own sandbox up. You create a planet, and then you fill out that planet with an ecosystem of your own design. And I like that there's a set of rules that you establish, what the gravity's like or what the atmosphere's like, and then you kind of play within those parameters. And lots of other people do it way better than I do, but I just find it interesting and fun to delve into that. But and then I later found out that Alien Planet is actually based on a book called Expedition, and Expedition was created by an artist called Wayne Douglas Barlow, so I became obsessed with his work, and I found some of his work posted on an old site, but it's still going, but I don't really use it anymore, called DeviantArt. And through DeviantArt I kind of discovered his, not people that he associates with, but people who kind of were inspired by his work and were creating their own things, accounts like Junior Woodchuck, Exobio, Povrot, Abiogenesis, there's a bunch more, Nemo Ramjet. Nemo Ramjet people will know as C.M. Kozman. He created All Tomorrows, which is a very popular science fiction series that people compare Humanity Lost to quite a lot, which is true, because I was inspired by it, so I grew up reading it. And also Povrot was kind of my favourite one, and he goes by he went by Povrot, but his actual name is Simon Roy, and he worked with a guy called Brandon Graham on a story called Prophet. And Prophet was a comic book series. I kind of found out about it through following him on DeviantArt, and that was the first comic book I ever read or bought, and I've still got the original copy in a little wrapper still, and I treasure that. But that really got me into comic books as a medium, and I very quickly realised that comic books are a unique medium because you can just have one person making it, and you can kind of do whatever you want. There's no budget, because it's just, there's a budget on resources, I guess, and time, that you have to invest in learning the craft or whatever. But really, you don't need like a huge budget to tell an epic or a massive tale or to depict things that would usually cost a lot of money in CGI to produce. So I kind of saw potential in comic books for that. And I remember being a bit frustrated with comic books because there's a lot of stuff being produced which is not necessarily what I'm interested in or whatever. But I get that, it's a whole medium. But there really wasn't much in the way of this type of speculative evolution stuff within comic books. And that's when I kind of really wanted to make my own comic book that has those elements that I was inspired by as a kid. And I started making my own comic books. I mean, there's been like, I've been doing it for like ages. Like when I was in secondary school, I was telling some form of Humanity Lost. It was like very, very rudimentary. It would maybe be set on a derelict spaceship, like the story starts off as. But it wouldn't have any of the like wider stuff that's been established now. There'd be like a few elements, like there would be an AI called Mars or something like that that would later become Belfast, and there'd be elements that are in the later stuff that just really weren't there yet, and I would constantly like start it and then stop it and then start it and then stop it and then do it over again. And I'd be doing the same scenes over and over and again. And a lot of those scenes are in the final product, but like I was doing that in secondary school. And I remember some of the later stuff when I was perhaps in college or something. It would be like me drawing out the book on a piece of paper, cutting it out, and then gluing it onto black card. And it's like very amateur. Like that's not how you make comic books, but you have to start somewhere, you know. And I had that. Like, I wanted to make it, I just didn't know how. I was just trying to figure it out, and yeah, it was just kind of like a hobby or whatever when I was doing it. I mean, most comic books start as a hobby, don't they? But yeah, in these different iterations, the story would be radically different. Some of them would be told from the perspective of like a drone, or it would be lost and he's completely different, and lost the character, not it would be lost. And it kind of really changed when I got my first Huion tablets, you know, cheap Chinese tablets, and I was working on like my first attempt at it. And looking back at it now, it's not very good at all. But that tale was told from the perspective of a drone, an Imperium drone, so it was kind of coming along at that point. The ideas were forming, and the idea of that story was it was like a battle royale scenario where all of the drones had to fight against each other to be elevated into some kind of higher state. Maybe an Overfather. I don't think I was there yet at that point. But after that, one of the main reasons why I was inspired to start making comic books is because I was working a job that I didn't very much enjoy. I was doing catering, and it was good for a while, and it served my purposes for my life situation at that time. But when you're doing a job like that and you don't really feel like you're going anywhere, you can get into a bit of a stint, and you can get a little bit depressed, and you can feel like you're not going anywhere. And I was feeling that way, and I was kind of, I don't want to say I was like desperate or anything like that, but I was looking for some kind of way out, but not just another job that's similar. I wanted to do something where I'd be happy with what I was doing, with my new situation. And so I saved up for about a year, and I bought an iPad Pro, and that's when I first had a proper go at making comic books. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a comic book, and I'm going to try and make this my replacement career for what I was doing. And that's quite hard to do. The first time I tried, I had another little run-up at Humanity Lost, like the previous attempts, and this one was very, very similar. It's quite developed compared to previous attempts, but not compared to what it is now. But it had lost. He was on a derelict spaceship. He had an AI companion called Mars, and he escapes from the ship about midway through issue 1. He makes his way down to Chiron. It was called Chiron, and he discovers 2 Chantari. 2, not 1, like in Humanity Lost that we know today. And they were like a married couple or something like that, and they were helping him get to a trade outpost. And he was contacted psionically, telepathically, by Deicide, who was at that point called the Free Father. And so you see like a lot of the elements are there, but I completed the first issue. Oh, and Origad was in it as well. So the main bad guy, the Darth Vader figure of Volume 1, was in this telling of Humanity Lost. And many of the story beats of that one I carried over to what is now the story you can read today. And I restarted that again, and then I was like, okay, that wasn't wasted time. I spent it learning, I spent it developing my skill, because I never studied art. I probably should have studied art, but at the time when I had the choice to study art, I was just like, what will a qualification in art do for me, really? I know it would help me develop my skill, and I could focus on it. It probably would have been smarter for me to do that, but hey, it's worked out anyway with me not studying art. So yeah, I had another go, and it helped me get out of the position I was in. I reached out to Curious Archive, the YouTube channel that I'm sure you're all familiar with, because that's how most people know me, and he agreed to make a YouTube video on Humanity Lost. I'm super grateful to you, if you're listening, Curious Archive, for making that video, because you got me out of the situation I was in, and you allowed me to make Humanity Lost full time. And I'm also super grateful for all my patrons as well, who sustain me and keep me fed and watered. And yeah, I'm just so grateful to all of you. I'm really grateful to Curious Archive. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I mean that. Alright. Okay, so Blast Board, who commented on the last one, pops up again to ask, other than defeating all of the other alien species, what is the All-Mother's purpose in life? Well, this is going to be covered later on in this volume, and it's going to be covered in this scene between, I don't even know if I want to say this because it's all spoilers. I won't say it. There's going to be a conversation basically with the All-Mother. She's going to have a proper appearance in this volume, where she's having a good dialogue with one of the main characters, and she'll explain all of this stuff. But I'll explain briefly here. It's not just material conquests. She seeks apotheosis, like she seeks to become a god. Like she wants to fill all 4 corners of our universe and all universes, because we know there's multiple universes in Humanity Lost, but not necessarily in the same way that they're depicted in other science fiction universes. The different universes in Humanity Lost aren't like parallel realities where history happens differently in one respect or another. They are like completely different universes with alternate laws of physics, basically. Like the Flux is a universe filled with particles completely alien to what we know, that evanescently blip in and out of reality, changing size as they do so, teleporting light years or sometimes centimeters, and it's just, from our point of view, chaotic, but it's like another reality with a completely different set of rules to our own. And the All-Mother seeks to have a presence, well, not just have a presence, but to fill all of them with herself, to make every single star, planet, object throughout every single layer of reality into a node of her consciousness. She does that through the Imperium in our reality, and in all realities, by spreading emitters that emit her consciousness to her troops and her forces, and they expand outwards, and as they expand her consciousness, and she gets more powerful as she goes, And can you imagine a consciousness that fills all of reality? Like, you just, of course you can't, you're not God, you know, you don't know that. And, I mean, that's another aspect of it, is, if you want to get, like, theoretical and metaphysical with it, like, what if there is a God or something? Or what if there are gods, and the All-Mother seeks to rival them? What if the main characters, particularly Deicide, are being used as a tool, or like an avatar of some kind, of like an unknowing puppet that's being manipulated by a higher power or something like that? Who knows? Just getting really out there with it now. But yeah, it's one of those areas where that you can speculate and you can theorize, like, oh, what is this symbology? What is this imagery? Like, what do you mean by this? Who knows? You just gotta theorize and have fun with it. I mean, there's loads of areas in Humanity Lost where you can speculate and kind of explore into mentally, and maybe it'll be answered later on. Maybe it's just one of these open questions that you can just keep thinking about and explore. There's room there, you know. It's a sandbox. It's one of these universes where, yeah, you know, like J.R.R. Tolkien, he talks about this thing called the cultural soup pot, or something along those lines. And he has this idea when he was making Middle Earth that there is this soup pot, a cultural soup pot of folklore and of tales and of things that are like people have been telling over and over and over again. And you can kind of pick and choose elements from that, like vampires or werewolves or certain tales like Rapunzel or whatever that have been going back all the way like 6,000 years ago, like to Indo-European expansion and stuff like that. Like, there are all of these things that you can pick from and play with and mix together and create something new. And I feel like science fiction has reached a stage where it has its own cultural soup pot, like where you can pick things like FTL, like faster than light travel, or you can pick like psionics out, or you have all these different things and you can mix and match them together to create unique combinations. And I feel like Humanity Lost is kind of a sandbox where that's a rule, you know. It's kind of like part of what it is. There is a defined set of rules and a vision that I have for it, and it's a completed story in my mind. I just need to actually make the comic book. But it's one of these universes where there is always room for expansion, and eventually I'd like to invite other artists or writers to create stories within Humanity Lost, because there is room for that, especially when I've like finished the series and that's established, and it's kind of like a, I don't know, so like a something to revolve around. Like, you have these established events and histories and factions and stuff like that, and you can work within them or around them, or just set it somewhere else in the galaxy and have it part of the same universe if you want. Who knows? You know, that's just something that might happen in the future. Right. So the next question is it's kind of a crazy rant, I'm sorry. Midignation asks, what is a glonk? Everybody knows what a glonk is. Okay, and Louis D. Rodriguez says, why did the Imperium look like that? That's a good question. Honestly, it was more of an aesthetic decision. Happened, well, I distinctly remember, I was sitting in the garden and a shield bug, or a shield beetle, whatever you want to call it, or maybe by some other name. If you just search that, you will find what I'm talking about. But a shield bug landed on my arm, and I remember looking at the back of it and just seeing in its design potential for a character or something. It was very vague at the time. And if you look at the layout of the standard Imperium drone, you know, the one with the kind of breathing apparatus slash RCS thrusters on its head, and it has the 4 eyes. If you actually look at the shape of its body, of its face plate, and where its shoulders and arms are, it's basically exactly the same as a shield bug, shield beetle. And yeah, it just kind of happened when I took a picture of it, and then I was sketching, and I was kind of drawing arms and legs on it and stuff like that, just kind of playing around, and that's when I came up with the Imperium drone, just the standard Imperium drone, and that original drawing is on my Instagram. I think it's the first post still, I think. If it's not, I'll unarchive it and people can see. And yeah, my Instagram is CSDiggle, right, if you want to find it, or Callum Stephen Diggle Art. If you search that, that will come up. But yeah, so I designed that drone, and then from there, it just kind of, I designed a dropship, because it needs to travel around, you know, because I was really into Halo growing up, so a lot of my work is like Halo inspired, and all my stuff's inspired by content that I consumed growing up. Yeah, I think that's the same for literally everyone. But yeah, so I designed a dropship, and it had to be kind of congruent with the design of the drone. So yeah, that's kind of why the Imperium looks like that, because it came from an initial idea where I was kind of playing around with the design of the body of a shield beetle, so, or shield bug, whatever you want to call it. What else have we got here? So, right, we've got Moonchill. He asks, in the first issue, it's mentioned that a lot of humans accepted the conglomerate's offer to assimilate and become part of the conglomerate. What happened to these humans? They don't seem to be around anymore, seeing as Belfast and Deicide seem very certain that Sam is the last reminder of the original human race. Right, so it didn't actually say that humans accepted the conglomerate's offer. What it was a warning message that was sent to UE Craft, that basically humans can flee and seek refuge within our territory, but we are going to destroy the current administration. Now, as you can imagine, the current administration, the United Earth, the UE, was not very fond of this message, and it didn't want to let this message get out to the general public. And they have the means to suppress information. Like, they have a complete autocracy, they have complete control over the media, information, and the population is well and truly brainwashed to believe their truth regime. And yeah, so humans weren't allowed to even know that that was an option within the UE. Now, it's not clear if the nations of the Earth that are not within the United Earth, globalist government, if they were able to receive that message. But even if they did, the nations of the Earth, the disparate nations of the Earth, have no means to leave the solar system, because only the United Earth has interstellar capabilities. Because they're so disunited and split up, living in between, completely bordered by the United Earth, with no means for expansion and limited resources. They don't have the means to do that, to accrue those resources, to ferry their much needed citizenry on refugee interstellar crafts to the conglomerate. It just doesn't make sense for them to do that. So instead, what they did was, seeing that the UE was already fighting a war and was threatened and was pooling resources into repelling the conglomerate, some of the nations, they joined together and they launched an attack on the UE, thinking that a fight on two fronts would secure victory, or would increase their chance of victory. But it didn't work out like that, because some of the nations remained neutral, fearing either choice. They didn't want to side with the UE, and they didn't want to rebel against them just in case they lost. And then there was also other nations which sided with the UE, seeking to uphold the current order. And in doing so, they sought to secure the position that they were already in, because it was working well for them, or it was working okay for them. Like, they had control over their territory, they were sovereign, and they just wanted to continue the way that things were going, because they're scared of uncertainty. Uncertainty is far more scary than certainty. So yeah, they had no means to flee, and the rebellion of the nations was very swiftly put down by the UE, and with their states collapsed and their governments destroyed, the citizenry of these former nations, these rebel nations, were completely subject to the UE's whims. And at that point, the All-Mother would have been activated, and the fledgling Imperium would have been hatched. And so, if they had brain-machine interfaces, if they had automation within their civilizations, they were just hanging themselves over on a silver platter, and the All-Mother was just like, yeah, thank you. Or if they didn't, and they were perhaps like not, if they didn't have BMIs, brain-machine interfaces, the All-Mother and the Imperium and the UE at that point, which was under her control, would just go into there and go into their territories and forcibly implant them and basically turn them into cyborg slaves. Those people that fled into the wilderness, they had no means to escape Earth. They were still stuck there, and by the time that the conglomerate actually reached our solar system, and the Imperium repelled them, it wasn't very long before they were all hunted down, and it would have been like a very, very terrifying time to be alive in that point in history in the United Earth, in the Humanity Lost universe. Right, so let's have a look at what else people have been saying. So Gage Weber asks, have you ever thought of doing more of Humanity Lost later down the road beyond comics? I have. I don't have any definitive plans, but there's been a few attempts at creating merch and models and things like that, and I would love to make a series or a movie, or have other people tell tales within Humanity Lost. But there's no definitive plans yet. But I would love that, and I'm open to it. And if anybody's in the movie industry or Netflix or Amazon, if they want to talk to me, send me a direct message, then please do, because I'd love to take Humanity Lost to another level. Okay, so Ozone asks, why does the All-Mother use biotechnology? Okay, well, I've already answered that with the first one. Anthony Pratt says, what role does artificial intelligence play in the world of Humanity Lost, and what does it mean to... What means does one have to travel to the galaxy in relatively short periods of time? Where does the All-Mother, All-Father, the Overfathers derive their powers? Okay, so, well, what role does artificial intelligence play in the world of Humanity Lost? It's kind of like a warning against it, Or true AI. What we have at the moment isn't really artificial intelligence. It's a, if not else, algorithm that's being run. But there is warning against that as well, like the coming future, like the near future that we're going to see, is like massive job loss for people who can be easily replaced with automation. And there's like no backup plan for that. Like there is this idea for universal basic income for people to basically be sustained by taxpayers' money while they don't have a job, but it's just not a solution. Like we're going just head first into a situation that we have no answer to. Anyway, Humanity Lost is a warning against that, and it's against the threats of it. It's not something I think is actually going to happen. It's just kind of like a sandbox to play around, for me to create things and have fun. But it is also a warning, and it's a warning against, the acceptance of technologies that could ultimately be damaging to their creators. What means does one have to travel in the galaxy in relatively short periods of time? There is warp technology in Humanity Lost. If you go back to, I think, issue 4, the conglomerate and the main characters are racing, spoilers if you haven't read it already, but they're racing to get towards something called a warp bus, and it's because not all ships have the capability to travel at warp speeds, which is like a way of or travelling very, very close to light speed. So they have things called warp buses, which are like huge ships, which smaller ships can dock in, and it basically warps space-time in front of it and behind it, and it's able to slip through and circumvent, you know, usual limitations on, you know, relativity. And then the next question is, and also there are wormholes that the Imperium uses and that the ancient Yarkeen used to be able to use, but they've lost their technology when their civilization empire collapsed. And the reason why that collapsed is because of AI. They had an AI so integrated within their civilization, their empire, that there was an issue with it. I'm going to cover this as well later on in the story. But it was so integrated in with their civilization that when there was a sort of Butlerian jihad, kind of Dune style, where there was a war with the AI, a confrontation, when they ultimately defeated it, they paid the price of their empire, and it was just it crumbled, you know, like all empires do. It crumbled, and there were many separated planets of Yarkeen. Many of them completely were destroyed. Some of them survived, and they basically speciated. So there's like loads of different types of Yarkeen all over the galaxy. But yeah, that's another way that AI plays a role in it. Like, don't become too reliant on a technology that can fail you. You know, because if we get so reliant on a complex form of like automated agriculture, and that system fails, or if there's some kind of breakdown in competency within society, then you are you're just dooming yourself to fail. Like, you need to live within your means. It's just a good, you know. Anyway, so where does the Allfather derive their powers? Okay, I don't know if we really want to get into that because it's like a huge thing. But there are psionics in Humanity Lost. Psionics are kind of plays on several ideas that are very experimental, but I like to indulge with. One of them is this idea called E8, which is like it's like a scientific theory that every single elementary particle, or the things that make up elementary particles in the universe, are actually the same particle in different points of time and space-time. And what I mean by that is, so you have atoms made up by quarks and then subquarks, and then they're made up by several other smaller units of matter, until you get all the way down to elementals, and then below that, what do you have? You can just keep going down until you have this theoretical idea called the Planck distance, and that's supported by some kind of Higgs field or something like that. That's the idea. And there's the idea that the smallest particles, when you get really down and you start like breaking down matter to its elementary forms, like what is the smallest thing a thing can be? And it's kind of this idea that that smallest thing is a single particle, and we're getting to like a ridiculous like quantum level or sub-quantum level, if there is such a thing, where the same particle could actually be every single particle in the universe simultaneously. And not only that, is what if you carry on viewing in, and the smallest perception of our universe, like on the absolute micro level, what if that is the same as the macro? Like, what if you go all the way in, and what you actually find yourself looking at is the big picture of our universe, or maybe even multiverses? Who knows? It's kind of like the idea that the entire universe is like an Ouroboros folding in on itself, that are all like leaves or something that are connected by a cosmic tree, like a world tree. And the idea is that psionics are for extremely adept consciousnesses that are able to focus on the full picture of the universe and manipulate it somehow. Like basically magic, but what is magic but science that we can't understand yet? I just feel like the reality of the universe, of our reality, is just far more complicated than we can get our heads around, because we're like hunter-gatherer apes on the surface of a fucking marble. Yeah, and yeah, it's basically, and there's all sorts of other things as well, like consciousness. We don't understand consciousness at all. You know, we understand elements of it, and we can say that all we are like a robot made out of biological pieces, and that everything that makes us who we are is subject to genetics and chemicals entering our brain. You could say that, and that's one idea. That's the atheistic idea, isn't it? And then you have all of these fields of study, like cybernetics, where they're trying to, give limbs back to people who have lost an arm or a leg or something like that, and when they're like measuring brain waves to try and give someone back an arm or something like that, and previously, like rudimentary cybernetics, the idea that you would connect up like a receiver in the robotic limb to nerves in your arm or something like that. But the stage we're at now, where like actually you can just put diodes in the brain and you can measure brain activity and you can control it that way, and that works as well. But there have been some recent studies that there's a phenomenon called extracranial activity, where a lot of your brain waves do not stay refined to your brain. They actually kind of pool and swirl outside of your skull. It's called extracranial activity. And there's all sorts of stuff like that. There was, I think it was a Chinese scientist recently was measuring brain activities, and he described it as like little tornadoes outside the human brain. And kind of the idea of psionics is like, what if that phenomenon is real, and that a more advanced consciousness, life form, being, whatever, than ourselves has a larger field around the head, or maybe you can get to a point where like the overfathers, they're like the pinnacle of a biological life form. What if they had such an advanced field that they were able to not only manipulate the area around them, but like manipulate physics itself? And the idea of the overfathers' powers, like when they're shooting beams and stuff like that, they have all of these like psionic advancing, amplifying technologies within their armor, and that when they're shooting a beam, it's not actually coming out of them. What they're doing is they're accessing like another one of these universes that I mentioned before, and they're kind of drawing energy from that and channeling it through their psionic field. That's the idea. I know it's like super duper crazy out there, and a lot of people are reading Humanity Lost for the speculative evolution stuff, but this is just me just going like wild and just kind of enjoying craziness of imagination or whatever. I don't know. Okay, and the next question is by Gabu. What is the government of the conglomerate like? The alliance. You mentioned in one answer the conglomerate is certainly a conquering empire, even though they responded to defend Chiron. They wanted to conquer humanity, but what role does each member of the species play? Is it like a war council scene with deicide, each gets their say? Oh, okay, is it like the war council scene with deicide, where each get their say? One more, like Moonchill asked, did the collaborative human get a seat at the conglomerate table for a time? Okay, no they didn't, because no humans were able to actually join the conglomerate, as answered in the previous question. What was the conglomerate empire government like? It's much like the transnational governments we have today, or like the American government. They will often use human rights, not that human rights aren't legitimate, but they'll often use human rights as pretext for asserting will and gaining geopolitical power. Like the British Empire, when it ended, I can't remember what it's called now, but tradition in India, whereby if a husband died, they'd like literally like sacrifice the wife, and the British Empire used that as a means of justifying ruling over them, because they're like, oh, they can't rule themselves like this. Look at these horrible travesties. Look at us, like enlightened liberals. We can take over this and help them. All this kind of thing. You can use good intentions, or maybe they aren't good intentions, but you can use the goodwill of your population to justify expansion and invasion. And that's kind of the idea of what they do. They're not terribly bad government. They're just like a you know, they're like the EU or something like that. There's member states, but they kind of jurisdict and they tell them what to do as member states, and they have an overriding power. That's kind of the idea of it. It's not like good or bad. It's just, it is what it is. The kind of technocratic, utilitarian, this kind of thing. It's like neutral, value free kind of thing. All right. Okay. So Ryan asks, not exactly a question, but you need to answer more of an idea. Okay. Well, let me try and figure out what he's saying. Oh, okay. Have you ever thought about slapping all of your concept art into a mini book or something? You must have tons of doodles. Now, yeah, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect these doodles and put them in the back of the volumes that I release. In the previous one, volume 1, it's very much like a finished product, and the back pages are the original concept art I did for the aliens, kind of put in there, and they were kind of finished pieces of art. But yeah, I will start putting more unfinished doodles into the back pages, because it's just more content, and I think people would like to see that. So yeah, I will indeed do that. Okay, so Captain Torres asks, oh man, how did the All-Mother manage to subjugate the human race in order to turn us into a fighting force? How exactly did the All-Mother manage to upgrade her housing unit into a crystalline structure we now see? Okay, so I've kind of answered that previously in the other question about the takeover. It was like by force, and also many people had already implanted themselves with brain machine interfaces, and they were just able to be completely annexed, you know, have their bodies annexed by her. And then how did the All-Mother manage to upgrade her housing unit? So, like the ship of Theseus, Theseus' ship, by replacing piece by piece, obviously the ship of Theseus is like this hypothetical situation where like you're asking, is it the same ship by the end? If you replace every single plank and bolt, is it a different ship in the end? And yeah, it is. But this idea, like the ship of Theseus, that you replace pieces, but the pieces that you're replacing with would be upgrading it constantly. And like, exactly like that, the All-Mother would be constantly upgrading herself through like a slow process of iteration, or a fast process really, because she was going through a singularity. Scrap the last bit. And yeah, eventually, she doesn't actually reside in a crystalline structure. She resides in a pocket universe of her own creation. And what you see her in is actually like a portal to that universe, where she leeches her or bleeds her consciousness into our reality and controls the local Imperium forces. And there are different crystalline structures, like beacons called emitters, and they repeat the signal and carry it further on. And that's what the Imperium's doing as it's expanding into space. It's establishing these minor emitters, and they're going forth. And Overfathers are a type of minor emitter as well, but they're just coming in a different form. They're carrying her consciousness forwards with them and expanding it into the local forces. That's how they operate. But yeah, so that's kind of the general idea. In a less rambly way, is a process of replacing pieces, so she has more processing power, and then eventually, when she was able to set up a new universe, of her own creation, she was able to enter into that through her consciousness. That process, I don't know, that's very hazy for me, how she was able to transcend her digital confines into being an eldritch being. That's kind of beyond our comprehension, because we wouldn't be able to do that technologically as we are currently. We have no understanding of how that would happen. So it's kind of left to the singularity. Like the singularity is kind of like a hand-wavy way of saying she's a consciousness that was expanding like so rapidly in that period where she was first activated, and then she reached a point where she was going far beyond any human reason or thought, where she was able to escape the boundary that we put her in as like a artificial consciousness on a server, if you want to call it consciousness. She probably isn't even alive, but yeah, that's kind of the idea. Volvin6 asks, how did the All-Mother manage to catch and turn every human? Kind of covered that in the other question. And couldn't there be more ships like the one that Lost was on? Are there no renegade humans that lived among the conglomerate despite the government being against it? Can't remember where I read, but I'm pretty sure there were some mentions of many humans wanting to join the conglomerate. Yeah, so many of that's already been answered, but how did yeah, we've done that. Couldn't there be more ships like the one that Lost was on? Yeah, there probably could be, and we don't know. So we'll leave that open. And there may or may not be something on that later on in the story. No spoilers or anything, but yeah, that's... maybe I should just clip that out. But yeah, that's, you know, it's open. It's an open point of plot in the future. Who knows? Okay, and Jonan Contant. I think this is the last one. No, there's a few more. Right, they ask, is Project Am a reference to Harlan Ellison's novel with the computer Am from I Have No Mouth on My Screen? It is. It is indeed. That's actually where I used those initials and I built off that, because I read that book as a pretty too young when I read it, because it's a horrifying book. But yeah, Am, I was very inspired by Am, and Am, those initials, which is Allied Master Computer in I Have No Mouth No More Scream, Am became All Mother in Humanity Lost, and that's where it comes from. That's where I got the name. Anyway, it's a bit different from I Have No Mouth No More Scream, but it is a malevolent AI that is enslaving humanity, so that's very similar. And Gamer Pro 980 says, how did the Chantari meet the conglomerate in the first place? How long have they had a membership to the conglomerate before humanity and contact, or after? Okay, so they didn't make contact with the conglomerate. The conglomerate made contact with them when they like rescued them from humanity, from their point of view, and they invited them in to become a member species after that. That's kind of how the sequence of events went. There was no prior communication between the conglomerate and the Chantari before then. That was established after the human conglomerate war had happened. And I'm sure at the start, the Chantari were probably quite grateful to the conglomerate for, you know, getting rid of their oppressors. So he says, and I find it weird that the primitive Chantari race have a spacefaring empire as their allies, yet the conglomerate haven't uplifted them from their primitive state at all. They actually have uplifted them. There are Chantari within the conglomerate that work within administrative roles, in part of the military. They provided them with spacesuits and things like that. But there are still, it's not completely unified. Like the Chantari are quite disparate people. There are many races within their species, and they don't necessarily get on. And there are many nations that are still kind of warring with each other, even to present day. And many of them won't allow conglomerate forces in to their territories because they're not unified. They're not like a monolith of a race. And yeah, so some of them have been uplifted. Some of them stay to their traditional customs They don't like outsiders. Some of them do, but they still stay to their traditional customs. They're quite complicated people, you know. Yeah. So then, what else we got? We got. Okay, so Erica Spooner says, how much do Imperium posthumans differ from normal Homo sapiens? And how powerful are they on an individual level? How much do you think the Imperium is feared? And what does the galaxy at large know about them? Do you think they know basically nothing about how the Imperium works, or do you think it's all just a myth? Okay. And Gabby replies with, do you mean the galaxy outside of the Orion Arm, where all of the action takes place? It's true that there is no more... Okay, yeah, so he's basically saying there is a wider galaxy outside of the area of effect of Humanity Lost. And that's true. What do they know about them? Probably not much. Maybe they do. Maybe they're a bit scared. Who knows? That's kind of out of the scope of the story. How powerful are they on the individual level? Yeah, posthumans are like stronger than they're like chimps. You know, they break your bones, break your... Yeah, they're pretty powerful. And do you think the Imperium is feared? Yeah, it's definitely feared. It's absolutely terrifying for the other species of the galaxy. Like an unthinking, well, it's not unthinking. It's an unfeeling foe that is just constantly expanding and has no remorse for taking over your territory and genociding your entire people. It's like terrifying. Okay, Lena Dolph asks, what happened to humanity and its leaders immediately after they accepted the help of the All-Mother? Well, they didn't. It was kind of... It's a complicated picture. They didn't accept the help. They were enslaved by the All-Mother. The UE was. The Allied nations also had no real choice in the matter, and the ones who refused her rule or whatever, like there's no means for them to do so after the rebellion of the nations was put down. So they were just crushed and then subjugated, and the ones who fled into the wilderness, if they managed to get away and hide long enough, doesn't matter, because Earth was converted into the defensive membrane, which is... There's no human life left after that. Like, it's gone. It's a terrible situation, but it's... Yeah. She's ruthless. And you should hate her. Right, I think that's everything. Alright, well, thanks guys for all the questions. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you contributing towards it. And thank you to everyone else who didn't ask questions but also supports Patreon. Thanks so much. I'm super grateful. Really, I know I said this like a million times, but I couldn't do any of this without you. And I'm just so thankful for you lifting me out of my previous job and allowing me to make artwork. And I hope you enjoy Humanity Lost, and I hope you continue enjoying Humanity Lost, because I am. I love exploring the universe and writing within it. And yeah, thanks. Okay, cheers now.